some unique conditions when working with the public sector from a government perspective. Apart from being funded by its citizens through taxes, the public has also experienced very little pressure to innovate over their bureaucratic and formalized structures. This means that the absence of design capabilities in government shouldn't really come as a huge surprise to us. Iain and Karina are changing this. Based on a classical design methodology, they've created something that seems kind of like a design festival to drive the adoption of design methodology in government. They're here to share with us their award-winning projects from Queensland. Please give them a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone. It's really lovely to be here with you all. Yes, we've come from Sydney for this event. In Australia, this conversation is still quite new about organisation transformation through design. And Iain met Milan at a conference earlier in the year, and we thought we just must be here because we feel like we're amongst friends in this beautiful, kind of very calm setting. So I hope to continue this over the next couple of days and have a drink with you, hopefully beer, because we are in the home of beer. Okay, so Iain and I have been working in this space around human-centred design or growing human-centred capability for over 20 years now. We are old, or oldish, getting on. And then really large, complex organisations. So since 2009, Meld Studios, which is an organisation that Iain actually founded, we've worked with over 150 organisations across 15 sectors. So lots and lots of work across things like transport and infrastructure, education, public and private sector. And what we've actually seen is a bit of a trend for, in the last particularly 5 years, a growth in human-centred design, organisations wanting to adopt this into their organisation. And an awareness of this, but a real struggle to move beyond kind of tactical efforts of delivering niche services to their customers into becoming a human-centred organisation. So what we're seeing is a lot of people and design teams in organisations doing lots of great design work, but actually it's not getting out there and it's not having the impact that many of us actually want it to have. And this is something we're seeing more and more. We were at a conference last week and I asked everyone in the audience how many people have worked on a project in the last 12 months that actually hasn't gone out the door. And it was more than 90% of the people in a 900 audience. So that's really worrying. So what we're actually been doing and spending our last couple of years doing is really looking beyond the kind of work of the well-meaning practitioners, which we are all, looking deeper into the organisation to understand what are the challenges that organisations have in actually becoming human-centred. And it's messy and it's complex. What organisations we've seen is that many of them have been to tackle this, of, let's grow design teams, let's grow our design capability. And we're doing lots of that training. But it's actually not reaching and having impact into the strategy of the organisation. It's not affecting the DNA of the organisation, and it's not changing the culture and the way of working. So that's something that we've been trying to solve. So what we're going to talk about today is a case study of organisational transformation at scale through design. We actually, last year, were approached by the Queensland Government to actually help them embed human-centred design, or they actually talked about customer experience design at scale. They'd had numerous attempts in the past, so they'd been trying this over a number of years. They've had lots of teams, lots of really well-meaning individuals trying to kind of tackle being customer-centred as a way of working for government, but it was never really going anywhere. So they heard about some of the work we do and they said, can you come in and actually help us? Now let's just get a bit of a picture of what Queensland Government looks like, because it's actually not any typical organisation. We have people from Queensland in the audience here, so that's nice. So if we look here, the fact that Poland, Czech, we're talking about Eastern Europe, fits into the landscape of a third of Australia. So that is 1.8 million square kilometres of land mass. And people are very distributed throughout that. 4.9 million people is actually not that many, but they're scattered throughout that landscape. 220,000 employees. So they're talking about, we want to have a new way of working. Well, how are we going to impact 220,000 employees? We work in a company of 30. That's a completely different scale altogether, and across 21 different agencies. And some of the challenges that Queensland deals with is different to some of the other parts in Australia, in the fact that the population has got some serious issues around homelessness, job, the highest unemployment rate is in Queensland. We have the demand on social services is really high, and you think about some of the infrastructure challenges when you think about that kind of landscape. Think about rail and things like that. It's really, really complex environment to work in, let alone the quiet climate. It's hot. So when we came into this organisation, they said, can you actually create us a design toolkit that we can actually distribute out to the rest of the government to be able to work from? And we were like, yep, that sounds like a good idea. And they said, you're design practitioners, you're experts in design, create us a design toolkit. One of the first things we saw in the initial week was a scattering of design toolkits lying around. They were everywhere. None of them were particularly well thumbed. A lot of them are on the shelf with only the spine showing. Some of them were buried deep in intranets. It actually hadn't got traction. And what we thought is, well, if we go and design another toolkit, what difference is that going to make? Obviously none of the previous ones have worked. We know better or no different than any of those design agencies who've created those toolkits. Something's going on here. So we have a toolkit of design, and what we decided to do is, instead of actually being experts and going to a room and creating a lovely toolkit that was all about methods for practitioners, we decided to take a human-centred design approach to creating a human-centred design approach for Queensland Government, which is so meta. But it's the only tools that we have. So what we actually did is, first we actually went in and understood the context of the organisation. We worked with 15 agencies across Queensland Government to understand where had they been using design before. What are some of the challenges and the barriers that they're coming up with? What's the context and the culture of which they're working with? And what we found is that often human-centred design or design practices really rub up against the kind of the way that the organisation works. You're thinking about government processes, very rigid, very bureaucratic, very hierarchical. Thinking holistically and collaborating is not really part of their game. And Queensland Government in particular is sort of a more old school government agency than many in Australia. That things like project management, you have agile project management, waterfall project management. We do our project management in this way. Very highly kind of structured decision-making processes that involve egos at the top, and we're talking about politicians here, of which we have many in Australia now, since we've had another changeover recently. We make the decisions up there. What do you mean that we're going to become more collaborative and co-creative in our work? So these kind of things rub up against each other. There's also a lack of appreciation of what human-centred design could do. And of course, if people have never come across it before, how are they going to understand the benefits of it and want to apply it in their work? And also design was being applied too late in the process. So there's a lot of usability testing going on everywhere in the thing, but not much was actually happening in the strategic design place. Then what we did is we came up with a whole lot of different ways of tackling this project, prototypes of ways of working, new processes, new procurement processes. I don't know if anyone in the room deals with procurement. It's a big problem in Australia. Yes, horrible, horrible thing. So we worked with them to come up with all these different ways of working, and then what we did is we went out and tested it. So we sent out to various teams across Queensland Government new ways of working, and we actually piloted on 6 projects as well. So, one of the really important things that came out of this is the shift from practitioners to mindsets. All of these toolkits that we'd had in the past were very much focused on the methods of practitioners. This is how to run a great ideation workshop. This is how to go out and be a research practitioner. But when you think about all the employees in an organisation, they don't need to be design practitioners. What we want them to do is think in a designerly way. We want them to have a different mindset about the way they go about their work. And I think this has been a real big challenge in our industry, and I don't know if it's here, but particularly in Australia, there's a lot of training up of individuals in organisations and thinking we need to get them to be practitioners. And I don't necessarily think that's the way, and it's something that we tried to do in Queensland Government, is to say, instead of trying to train you all, let's actually let you have, and they give you the tools to think and behave in different ways. And the other thing is we tried to make it more holistic and joined up in its approach. So there were lots and lots of different ways of practicing design in Queensland Government. Transport had a way, finance had a way, Department of Human Services had a way, and it was all a different language. We tried to bring it all together. So what I'm going to do is now show you a video that actually explains it, because we have our lovely partners in this talking about it.
The purpose of the capability building program was to try and bring as many people as possible along on the journey of putting customers first.
Human-centred design is a different way of thinking and it's a different way of operating. In government, it's very different in some areas.
Too often we've designed all of our services to what's easiest for us. So creating a human-centred design toolkit, bringing those mindsets to the forefront was critical in our customer first value.
One of the things that we focused on was understanding what some of the blockers and challenges were for people in terms of executing a human-centred design process, understanding where specific government-related contexts that other toolkits or other methodologies that are out there might not necessarily help people to navigate, and these were key moments for us to develop with people practical ways to still be able to work with those processes in a way that enabled them to be true to a human-centred design approach.
It was really important that we get those tools out into projects teams for people of different roles to use them, to get a good understanding of what was working for them, what they needed more understanding on, and had regular forums for them to be able to provide feedback to us.
What we also did, we took the toolkit and piloted it live on a couple of different projects with people from government who had varying levels of exposure and experience with the design process.
So we were starting to learn what's missing from the toolkit. How do we explain things a little differently or easier for people so that they can understand exactly what we're doing?
And we were able to incorporate all of that feedback into the next iteration of the toolkit.
Growing capability isn't just about tools and methods. We also tried a number of different things to be able to help grow capability at scale. This included virtual coaching, which had teams from all over Queensland call in to talk about topics that related to human-centred design. We had an insights hub that centralised a lot of customer insights around how people engage with Queensland Government into one place, so teams could use it as a starting point for their design.
For us, following a design process in the development of the toolkit was absolutely critical, and it has completely made it a more successful project because we were able to build such a depth of understanding of the different levels people were at throughout the organisation and what their needs were. We were in a position to create a toolkit that people could pick up and relate to and go, okay, I can do this. Through this change process, the team itself has become this trusted wealth of information that can say confidently to our clients and any of the project managers that we're working with, have we really understood the problem? And how do we make sure that what we're designing is going to solve the problem that they were starting off with? It's also made a big difference in the level of collaboration that we see across government, and that's something that's really needed. We are using it to build capability throughout government, constantly sharing that document, very open and transparent. The more people that are using the toolkit, the better. Pretty much every single agency now have been exposed to it in one way or another, but it's a way of working within Queensland Government and one that we want to continually build upon.
So it's so interesting there that Gillian, who is one of the clients we worked with, said it's now a way of working, and that's what we were trying to achieve. We were trying to embed this way of thinking and this way of behaving into everyone across the department. And it's now in its third iteration. I had a phone call yesterday with them about they're going through the next iteration of it, so it continues to be a design process, which is lovely. So what happened? How did this actually play out? And what I wanted to is just tell you a quick summary of what it looked like in one of the pilot projects we did. So we took this process and applied it to the design of a new housing and homelessness service centre in Queensland. You think of that, that's a very vulnerable cohort, but it was actually being delivered and driven by the kind of internal architecture, facilities people. And they took a real risk to adopt a human-centred design approach, something when they had the property people breathing down their necks, just saying, give us a floor plan. So what we did is we were very conscious when we were going through this process with this entire department, the Department of Housing and Public Works, to not just take them through a design process, but step outside of this and explain to them, this is what it means for you from a mindset perspective. This is how you can be more collaborative in all your work, more holistic in what you do. So what happened is actually things like exposing the end-to-end customer journey of a homeless person meant that for the first time people in policy saw the upstream and downstream effects of actually their decisions and what was being made. At the same time, staff in this particular service centre found the same. If I don't spend time with this particular person who comes in and have a query, that actually has a huge impact on potentially the number of people in social housing down the track. So what we saw things, and we were talking to people about things, is about being empathetic, being egoless in our decision making. And we brought this kind of rhetoric and this conversation up outside of the project. And that's created lasting change. And you'll see in the video, there's been lots of change in this department, cultural change. Staff think differently about the way they work. They have agency now. And we've seen real policy change happen in a number of weeks from this project, which had never been able to take place before.
We had the housing strategy that was released, and it was really looking to change the focus of the department so it was more personal, human-centred in terms of its service delivery. At the same time, we were advised that a company we lease a building off for one of our HSCs, they were pulling the option and we had to move within a 12-month period. So we decided to put the two things together and say, well, how do we create a new office? How do we encapsulate all the things we want in the new way we want to do service delivery?
Providing housing assistance to vulnerable people is a cross-agency approach. So rather than just focusing on the housing centre itself, we look broader at the end-to-end housing service, the role of community services, the role of police and health in this process, to understand the role that the housing service centre was playing now, but also the opportunities for it to play in the future.
Going broad enabled them to actually feel and see what a customer was going through and blew the scope wide open on a project that could have been a very simple, you're going to design a new office environment.
One of the interesting parts of this process was the diversity of people that we had involved. We'd never really contemplated asking our staff what they want in an office space. Definitely wouldn't have asked our clients. Well, why would we ask them? They're not leasing the space, we are. And stakeholders, we wouldn't have considered them either. So this really is a complete turnaround for us in terms of what we would do.
created the future state concepts and ideas. We were able to go and then test them real life, real time in the centre with real customers and real staff. The day was incredible. We had lots of things happening when we set up some of the prototypes in the centre, so some things like free Wi-Fi, feedback box, kids play area. We had the water cooler, tried different processes for triaging people, and we had a staff member in front of house meeting and greeting the clients as they came through the door.
Right up until the opening, I was even worried about the safety concerns, because it is such a massive change. The environment is more relaxing, so people that come in, they don't feel that it's an us and them. They feel that we're walking them through the space to have a seat, more relaxed in private areas. So there's not a barrier, and clients are really picking up on that, and we're having great conversations with people.
It's interesting to see, just from having conversations with customers and the staff and also the NGOs or the caseworkers that are working with people, how broad the range of services are that are available to people through government and the Housing and Homelessness Centre. It wasn't just about social housing. There were so many other options available to help people that were a better match to what they needed.
The process itself has changed the way we think and the way we're doing our work within HPW. What I want is for this to be replicated across Queensland, to actually understand how we should shape our policy, how we should shape our services, the hubs that we want to roll out across the state, being very clear that we want a co-design process. It's not about me and it's not about the money. The return on investment here is the service that we deliver our clients. It's how people feel and the difference we make to their lives. So if someone can come in here and feel comfortable, tell their story, and we can give them the right service the first time, the investment's been returned in the first day for me. I am absolutely overwhelmed with the feedback that we've been getting. People are feeling good about the environment that they work in out the back. They're feeling good about the foyer. They're seeing clients are happy. So really starting to change the culture of this housing service centre.
People love working here now. It's completely different.
So what I want to quickly do is just draw out some broader reflections from this piece of work and some of the other work that we've been doing in this space with a broad range of different types of clients, and reflect on some of the key kind of trends and themes that we're seeing. So the first of these, and I think we've heard this very strongly already this morning, is a need to focus on mindsets over methodologies. We have, for so long, certainly as a design practitioner, as a human-centred design practitioner, we've worked on our beautiful projects at the coalface of the organisation and helped deliver great customer experiences and then watch them wither and fail, because the organisation isn't a fertile environment. There aren't nutrients in the organisational soil to allow these human-centred endeavours to actually have impact. So one of the things that we did on this project, and one of the things that we're starting to do on every piece of work that we do from now on, is looking at the mindsets of the organisation, the non-designers, and making sure that they understand how their role relates to a design process, how they can collaborate, how they can procure, how they can work with design processes. A second thing, and again, I realise I'm summarising a lot of themes which have already been spoken about this morning. There's often a Game of Thrones around different methodologies at play within organisations, And there was a real risk in this piece of work with Queensland Government that human-centred design would meet with resistance because somebody from outside was trying to impose a new way of working on the organisation. So that's why we took that human-centred design approach to the design of a human-centred design approach. We looked to basically become the glue that bound together all the different ways of working that they already had established. Some of those did need to change. Karina's already made reference to one of the tails that wags the dog, procurement processes. And they used to have processes which meant that you needed to have defined what the solution is before you went to market, which is, if anybody does work in kind of more human-centered design ways, it means that it's impossible to do true discovery research because the solution's already there in the terms of your engagement. So what we've helped them do is to understand actually that you need to put smaller budgets together to actually look to understand needs. And then you can define actually what you should go to market for. One of the more significant kind of lasting impacts from our piece of work. I also think that one of the broader reflections that we have from our work is that these projects need to sit within a broader context of a change program. There needs to be someone who is connecting and coordinating all of these many well-intentioned things in terms of improving outcomes for customers. And without that, you get collaboration fatigue. You get people who are running around and doing things, but actually they end up not actually having the impact that most people desire, or they're acting where multiple people are actually performing the same types of tasks and not really aware and collaborating with each other. So 3 models very quickly that we've seen in organisations. This is my rough and ready schematic of what an organisation looks like. Obviously, we now know from this morning that they're not all as hierarchical as this. But, you know, most customer-centred work is often focused exclusively at these customer touch points at the bottom. And these initiatives are pretty much what many human-centred design practitioners are doing with their entire lives, their entire jobs are around this. And they're designing great experiences in a vacuum. And actually the problem is that customers don't experience things like that. They experience them across different channels, and the totality of the experience that an end customer has is often actually very bad, even though there are human-centered design approaches at play. So we're seeing a slightly more mature approach from organisations who might have an overarching customer experience program or omni-channel experience program or something like this. You know, somewhere in the organisation there's somebody who is kind of the puppet master pulling the strings of all of these things that are affecting customers, and there'll be some kind of endorsement and buy-in from somebody senior within the organisation. But very seldomly do these programs actually have things to do with the organisation as part of their remit. They can affect things at the coalface between the organisation and its customers, but not things about how do we incentivise our staff, or what is the culture of this organisation, what are the behaviours that we encourage and endorse. So what we're seeing, and I would say that the work we did with Queensland Government is an example of this, is this growing understanding of the need to become a more human-centred organisation. We believe that comes from actually looking from the outside in, using the customer experience to hold a mirror up to the organisation to enable it to see how dysfunctional it actually is. Because looking at customer experiences, I hope many of you will know, that is the quickest single way to find out how dysfunctional an organisation is. If the customer experience is disjointed, it's because the organisation is very dysfunctional and disjointed. So by looking at things this way, you start to question, what is the purpose or mission of the organisation? What are the values? What are the behaviours? And from that, you get to things like incentives. I assume you know, but just in case you don't, there's a lovely book by Dan Hill called Dark Matter and Trojan Horses. And the theory for many years that certainly I think we practiced was that you could use these customer-centred Trojan horse projects that would waken the organisation up to what it's like to be a customer of that organisation. And you would affect the dark matter as a byproduct, the dark matter being the organisational culture. And I think the realisation that we've come to over the last couple of years is that sometimes the dark matter can completely neuter the Trojan horse, and that one needs to actually focus human-centered design projects explicitly on things which are about the organisation, where the organisation itself is the subject of the design activity, not the customer experience. And this has been played out, I know there's a couple of people from Australia in the audience, this has been played out to us on a daily basis through this thing called the Hayne Royal Commission that is going on into misconduct in the financial services sector in Australia. I won't bore you with details, we don't really have time for that, but here's a quote from somebody from the director of the Centre for Ethical Leadership, reflecting on this situation where organisations are setting up ethical and moral challenges for their staff. So, businesses continually set up incentive schemes and talk of being committed to the best interests of their customers, yet incentivise their employees to sell. It's an ethical trap, and it's almost impossible for rational employees not to sell. I think that a final kind of overall reflection that I will have here is that empathy is the biggest tool that we have. I don't believe that senior individuals in large complex organisations are inherently evil. Maybe some of them are. I think they're just a bit too distant from what it's like to actually be a customer of our organisation. We go out, we have the luxury of going out and conducting qualitative customer research. We understand people, their needs, their pain points, and we deliver that information back into the organisations. But I think that one of the lessons that we're learning is that this is actually very special information we have, and we need to make sure that this gets to the executive teams, to the board of directors, so that they actually have this information, so that they can actually join the dots and make better decisions, which will lead to them becoming better organisations. And I suppose something worth highlighting is that this piece of work was recognised in Australia by the Good Design Awards earlier on this year as the co-winner of the top design award for design innovation in Australia, which was a very pleasant thing. I mean, awards are, as anybody's ever won an award, it's great to win them, and if you don't win them, they're actually, you know, they're rubbish and nobody ever wants to win the awards. But it was a lovely thing to have this recognition. This institute, the Good Design Awards, had only ever previously given design awards to products, to very traditional things that we would think of as being things that designers produce. And I include this just because it shows that there is a growing recognition of the value, in quite mainstream kind of circles, the value that this mindset of human-centered design can bring for organisations. And it's things like this that when we have our darkened moments of, you know, things aren't going so well and we feel like we're bashing our head against a brick wall all the time, things like this and this support that we're starting to get from more mainstream audiences actually keeps us encouraged about the work that we're doing. My final slide, this transition is fragile. In the time that we were doing the work for Queensland Government, between when we finished the work and when we actually won the award, which was 6 months, 9 months, something like that, there had been 3 organisational restructures that they went through. They managed to survive by the smell of an oily rag, the team who were together doing this piece of work. So it could have all ended up being nothing before it was actually recognised as being something significant and thus getting support from the organisation. Embedded in this is this challenge around these things being owned by an individual in an organisation. And I think one of the reflections that we have here is that it's important for these things to be kind of owned by a committee or by a board. If it's significant, it can't be owned by just an individual in one department in the organisation. There's a trend for the customer experience officer or customer design officer. And I really think that that's not the way to go. This needs to be a board committee or some such that actually drives something of such significant change in an organisation. These transitions aren't quick. And I think that the final thing I will say is that it's important for those of us working in these spaces to find networks and peers to support us, both with inside our organisations and also the broader networks. It's challenging to do this work, and I wasn't involved in this piece as much as Karina was, but it is emotionally a roller coaster to do something as tough and challenging as this in an environment as brutal as any organisation, but specifically government. Thank you. And just in case anyone is interested and doesn't have any questions for us, we have some things that we'll be liking to talk to you about during the remainder of the conference. So.
In terms of the political stuff, the turmoil that was going on with the org transitions and so forth, how, if any, re-pitching, reselling, re-justification that had to be done, how did you handle that?
Yeah, it was messy. It was messy, and we had a lot of changes going on during that time, not just after that time as well. One of the things I've been working on as a lesson from that experience, because I think we're all learning as we go in this type of situation around transforming organisation, is I've been working with one organisation recently on a leadership onboarding program. So instead of when a leader comes on, they actually onboard everyone else who's been there forever as to what they want to do, we're actually helping them onboard new leaders. So we're shifting it around and we're saying, this is our mission, this is our purpose, this is the way of going about it. How are you going to contribute to that?
And I think another facet of this is so much human-centered design effort fetishizes the customer. It's as if they're the only humans that count. And I feel very strongly that the humans inside the organisation, even the people in the boardrooms, they need to be understood as humans as well. Doing good human-centred design does not mean doing what customers say they want. It means taking some pretty hard and pragmatic decisions and using customer as an additional data point to help people make better decisions. But it's not about saying we now do what customers say they want.
Yeah.
I think that's craziness for any organisation.
I agree.
Yeah, and all of this work has involved everyone, which is why it is messy. So we're not customer-centred designers sitting in a room, in a lab somewhere, coming up with stuff anymore. We are actually injecting ourselves into the fabric of the organisation to hear all of that stuff. We have a reason we want to do this, or we have a reason we want to do this, or customer wants this. We need to bring all of that together to create what's best. We can't go it alone.
We have another question for you.
Yes, how many people have you trained so far?
In Queensland Government specifically,
yes,
or?
Yes.
How many
people have been trained?
So one of the key things to mention is that we've trained them to train themselves.
Yes.
So
it's a trainer approach.
We're not doing all of that
Sure,
delivery.
I understand. Yes.
Yeah.
How many people?
So we help them design a training program, which is multifaceted. There's lots and lots of different elements to it. So every agency has some involvement in it, has had some involvement. So all 32 have had it in some way, being embedded in the way of working. What they're doing now is taking that next step up around, well, mindsets, yes. Mindsets in certain practices, yes. What does it mean to take that next step? So we've got kind of a multi-layered program that people actually are opting in and they can't keep up with the demand, which is why we're sort of looking at some different mechanisms now to actually help them. I think having the evidence to show people in a distributed way is actually helping people understand the benefits of it and then want to actually adopt the process. So I don't know the numbers because it's so big. I don't know how many of the 223,000 have.
But in another organisation, we're doing a readiness, kind of like an awareness training program for the entire organisation of 15 to 20,000 people.
Yep.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, scaling that, we're a 30-person company. That poses some challenges, and you're into that train-the-trainer type situation.
And have you heard of any other projects than the one you mentioned here that have been resolved, or problems have been resolved using HCD methodology and toolkit?
So I mean, there are a number in government, if we're talking specifically. So the Australian government a few years ago, so Australian government has federal, state and local government. So at a federal government level, there is something called the Digital Transformation Office. They are very similar to Gov UK, which is something else I know. I think probably most countries around the world have got one of these types of things going on. Typically, the first thing they have on their list is, user first or customer first or citizen first or whatever it is. So there's certainly methodologies like that that are known in Australia. That's probably the best direct example to the one that we're talking to there. Final thing, I've just posted something on Medium about our kind of reflections and ruminations on the types of things we've spoken about today. So please, if you want to have a look, join the conversation.
And chat. We'd love to talk.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.